The unlikely pairing of Saudi Arabia and Israel reportedly teaming up. This in response to Washington's Middle East policies. Representatives from the country's intelligence services apparently met for talks in Jerusalem. They are ultimately united in their disdain for America's reversal on the intervention in Syria. That, of course, followed by the agreement of an historic nuclear deal with Iran. Let's delve deeper into this. Here's RT's Gayane Chichikan.
The two countries, Saudi Arabia and Israel, found themselves in one boat in their frustration over Washington. Israel and Saudi Arabia hate the nuclear deal that the U.S., Russia, and other world powers struck with Iran. Israel is very vocal about it. The Saudis are a little bit more restrained, but the Saudi intelligence chief said there would be a major shift in dealings with the U.S. Saudi Arabia wanted the U.S. to go all in on Syria. The U.S. instead went along with Russia's proposal and cut a deal with the Syrian leadership to get rid of chemical weapons there. Saudi Arabia and Israel are very suspicious of each other. The Saudis oppose the creation of the Jewish state. They support the Palestinian cause. So it's too early to speak of a friendship, but Washington definitely brought them closer together, at least in their desire to threaten war. Saudi Arabia is now reportedly working with Israel on a plan to attack Iran. It reportedly gave Israel the green light to use its airspace in the case of a strike and pledged other assistance. Here in Washington, the Israeli lobby is fighting what they describe as a tendency in the U.S. to disengage from the Middle East. The AIPAC meeting was all about it. They talked about how war fatigue in the U.S. could be a reason for Washington to want to be less involved in regional affairs. They saw the nomination of Chuck Hagel as defense secretary as a signal pointing in that direction. Of course, the Obama administration quickly reassured everybody that the U.S. will not stop interfering in the affairs of the region. But Israel and Saudi Arabia are not so sure at this point, or they don't see the kind of interference that they would want to see. I'm Gayane Chichikan in Washington, RT.
And earlier here on RT International, we spoke to the Saudi Prince Khalid bin Farhan Al Saud. He believes the U.S. is ready to jeopardize ties with its closest allies in order to preserve its interests in the Middle East.
I believe the main reason for the change in America's alliances in the Middle East is the issue of the Iranian nuclear program. And that's a shift in the US approach to Iran from one of confrontation to one of containment. This is the main reason, even if it does come at the expense of America's strategic allies like Saudi Arabia and Israel. It is of the utmost importance to the US and its interests in the Middle East. No doubt US foreign policy takes care of its own interests. There are strategic alliances with Israel, and there are non-permanent alliances like with Saudi Arabia. But American interests are much more important to Washington than alliances. Let's not forget that Saudi Arabia and Israel always need Washington's support, militarily and on the intelligence level, as well as in many other aspects. They need the USA, and they rely on it.
And a former U.S. diplomat, John Graham, he told us what he thinks is making both Saudi Arabia and Israel so angry about that of U.S. foreign policy.
Both countries, Israel and Saudi Arabia, are very annoyed or frightened right now because of American policy toward Iran. Now, what's happened to annoy, frighten both of them is that, first of all, Obama actually called and talked on the telephone to his counterpart, something an American president hadn't done for decades. And second, the meeting in Geneva actually produced an agreement which looks like Iran will make significant changes in its nuclear policy in exchange for the lessening of sanctions. If they keep to the agreement, then we will definitely be lessening sanctions. And this is driving Israel and Saudi Arabia nuts.